Hello and welcome to the eTech podcast with me, your host, Ryan Maughan. I have been involved in the development of electrified vehicles and machines since 2005 as an engineer and a business leader. This podcast is the product of my passion for electric and autonomous vehicle technology. I'm here to share knowledge from some of the world's leading experts, as well as my own insights. Join me as we accelerate the transition to cleaner, safer and smarter vehicles and grow the industry around the world. And welcome to the show. Today we have Robert Wesley with us, and he is the Supplier Program Manager at Boeing and also the author of the Autonomous Platforms of the Future newsletter, and now also co-host of a really cool new podcast called Brothers in Aerospace and Defense. Welcome to the show, Rob. Really great to have you here.
Yeah, it was great to be here, Ryan. So really happy to, be on this show and have this platform to chat with you about, everything autonomous, electric vehicles and things like that.
Cool. So, Rob, if you could just start out by setting the scene and telling us about yourself, who you are and where you're from and how you got to be doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, for sure. So a little bit about my background. I'm originally from Jackson, Mississippi. So I went to Howard University, undergrad and both graduates. So I got my Bachelor of Science degree in mechanical engineering, and I went on to get my Master's of Business Administration degree in supply chain and marketing. So while at Howard, I actually lettered 4 years playing D1 college soccer. So I've always being big into sports and growing up, I played sports, all the sports that you could think of. I was also captain of that team my senior year of college. My career journey, it really has been all of in aerospace. I worked for 2 Fortune 50 companies in Boeing and United Technologies prior to their merger with Raytheon Technologies. And similar to yourself, I really have a passion for new technology. So that's been within the aerospace industry, for example, like electronics, robotics, etc., things like that. And recently my experiences within Boeing has afforded me to gain a lot of experience within autonomous platforms. So I've had, really dovetailed that into a niche in that area. I'm also the recipient of a Black Engineer Awards for Modern Day Technology Leader last year. I've also had the opportunity to be recognized by our PDS CEO during their 40th recognition ceremonies for the past few years. I'm also really passionate about the progression of minorities within STEM. So that's really a great passion of mine, and what I really see going for the future. I really want that next generation to see, people that look like them, people that, or have that background, to make sure they know the different possibilities in that area.
Yeah, and that's a huge problem. And I know a lot of people that listen to the show are in the US and in the UK, and we have a shortage of engineers kind of everywhere, basically. It doesn't actually matter. Even in China, they have a shortage of engineers, or particularly in China at the moment. But whichever country you're in, there's a shortage of engineers. But actually, it's pretty terrible in terms of representation of minorities, actually, and women in engineering. Is, for whatever reason, we don't manage to attract a more diverse group of people into the profession. And actually, it's an exciting profession. It's great for people who are, good with maths and kind of enjoy solving problems and stuff. But it's kind of not. Unfortunately, too many people look like me in the industry. He says, laughing nervously. I'm an old man now. I feel old, but definitely middle-aged white guy rather than So it's that's really important if we're going to grow engineering in the future, to be able to attract a more diverse range of people into it. What was it that got you interested in engineering? I mean, that very early sort of part of your career where you went to do your undergraduate degree. What inspired you to take that step?
Yeah, funny story there is that I've actually, my first year of college, I was actually going to be an architecture major. But I figured, going to the program, I figured it was a 5-year program, and I was like, wow, I can't do 5 years plus playing soccer. So I switched to engineering, mechanical engineering, because it was the closest thing to architecture, I thought. And I was always, pretty strong in math, and I liked being hands-on and working with my, hands and the problem solving. So that was really always a passion of mine to really get to something like working with my hands, doing problem solving. But what I saw growing up, what really got me inspired within STEM, my grandfather and his legacy. So he was one of the few African American electricians to own his own business in Natchez, Mississippi. So I saw him grow his business and really be a pillar in the community. And I think that really influenced me to be in the STEM realm overall growing up.
Yeah. It's interesting that you went from architecture to mechanical engineering. I think architecture is one of those topics. It's like draws a lot of people in because people recognize it, and you kind of, obviously we see buildings all the time, but the engineering, you recognize the architecture, but not necessarily the engineering that keeps it up.
Exactly. They're very similar, but they have different what they do in that respect in that space.
Yeah, architects are always a little bit too cool for their own good anyway. That's what I think. If any architects are listening, I have some good friends who are architects, and actually one in particular, you really would think he's an engineer. He's a very grounded, sensible guy. So
yeah.
I probably just insulted an entire profession there. I should stop digging myself a hole here. So you've been at Boeing a while.
Uh-huh.
So I kind of abbreviated in the introduction of the show, Supplier Program Manager, but you're Supplier Program Manager with Boeing, Defense, Space, Security. Like, it's a very long title. Boeing is a company that some people will know about, but I think a lot of people won't quite realize the breadth of activity that Boeing has as a business. So
exactly.
Could you tell us a bit more about the area of the business that you're working in and what you do there?
Yeah, so my current position as a supplier program manager it's within the supply chain function, but it really has a programmatic focus on it. So like it really, really easily translates to supplier program manager. So I'm managing, leading supply chain execution, business strategy, and stakeholder engagement for global programs portfolio to fulfill customer needs. So, in my domain expertise has spanned across jet engines, helicopters, aircraft parts, military platforms, and also autonomous development programs. So I really get to partner with engineering, program leadership, finance, contracts, and quality, and others to really ensure parts are received on time, of the right quality, and to fulfill those mission priorities. And, really Boeing as a whole for the defense side, it spans across space platforms, space opportunities, weapons, other defense classified platforms that are, we really can't talk about it.
Lots of secret squirrel right stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's the space piece, because I know you can talk a bit about what Boeing does in space. What does Boeing do in space?
Yeah, so it's satellite, different mission platforms. They're sending things to Mars, International Space Station, things like that. So that's a lot that Boeing does in the space realm. And it's exciting to see that develop even further as autonomous platforms are moving into that space even more, looking at habitable life outside of the Earth, that being a key priority for, Earth in general, because, our planet is not getting any bigger, but our population is steadily growing. So that's the other piece about, how do we make sure that we have space for everyone going forward?
Literally. Yeah. So this is like proper future looking. I mean, it's science fiction stuff, but is it really in the real in Boeing? The kind of, there's big teams of people working on stuff. I guess mainly satellites and space stations and kind of more kind of near to Earth things. But is the deep exploration piece, is that a big part of the business?
Yes, I can't go into too much details of that because I'm not on that part of the business.
Yeah,
I'm on more of the autonomous aircraft, and my team works with specifically BAE systems and making sure that, it's a big supplier of ours. It's a strategic relationship that we're helping to manage going forward. And that spans across a lot of our military platforms. So F-15, F-18, things like that, B-22, a lot of those things, BAE provides parts for.
Right.
So that's kind of what has been my focus. But, I have the ability to see across other avenues, but I can't go into a lot of details there.
Okay, maybe that was a bad lead on a question for you. But on the autonomous side of things, it seems like that is an area which, particularly in aerospace, is gathering momentum, or that's probably even understating it. It feels like it's going a bit crazy now in the aerospace sector, developing more autonomous platforms, and both from a defense application, but for more kind of civilian applications as well. Could you tell us a bit about what you're doing in that space?
Yeah, so two major trends that I see, going within the industry today is for, autonomous air platforms are really urban air mobility and also collaborative combat aircraft. So that's CCA for the collaborative combat aircraft. But those two avenues are really making a wave now because they're seeing, within urban air mobility is advancing so fast to accommodate the growing customer experience demand. So people are not wanting to sit in traffic, driving, long distances within just a congregated city landscape. For those short flights, let's say, when I hop on the airplane, helicopters are really hard to come by, personal helicopters. Those, how can you think about another mode of transportation to accommodate that? So that the, air taxis is really making a wave. So you have the companies like Volocopter, Whisk, and others that are really bringing those technologies to the forefront within the industry. And with CCAs, those are really those autonomous vehicles that can, perform different missions, ranging from carrying weapons to flying ahead with other aircraft to provide intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and to relay that valuable information and early warning to the various pilots to evade and detect. And they have that electronic warfare as well to strike targets on their own or in harness with the rest of the force that they're creating with.
Yeah, and that quite notably recently is big change in strategy in the U.S. defense sector, because it's quite public that they cancelled a big helicopter program with a view of diverting money into this new field of more autonomous aircraft and things like that. It's funny because you watch, again, it's sort of like science fiction catching up with reality.
Yep.
I was watching the Top Gun Maverick the other day, and obviously a subtext to that whole movie is the budget's going to get pulled from this jet program and diverted to drones. And now, a year or two on, actually it's happened.
Yep.
Not with a supersonic jet, but with a helicopter program, reconnaissance helicopter program. CCA, you called it, collaborative combat aircraft. That's not the thing of science fiction. These are like actual real things that are starting to become practical to use in theater.
Yeah, they're being utilized today, and they're even being developed to utilize even more in the future. So when you talk about utilizing, they're now moving forward to using them in mass. So having a large mass of these vehicles being ready and able to be utilized within the industry because of future war threats that the U.S. government are seeing in that area. And this is really kind of that new breed of significantly less expensive and highly autonomous, mission-focused and unmanned collaborative combat aircraft that is going to fly along those fifth generation and even newer human crewed aircraft and fighter jets.
It's a kind of loyal wingman concept. I hear that
exactly.
Yeah. So you still have a pilot and a plane, but then you've got them being serviced effectively by a number of autonomous aircraft that can provide effectively extend the horizon for radar systems and sensing, or provide more kind of versatility. Get the word out. Oh gosh, it's Friday. So yeah, quite an interesting field in itself. Of those two topics, the urban air mobility is one of those things where at the moment it's in a bit of a hype cycle, but it's like on probably the downside of the hype cycle, where maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, there was some huge investments going in, but now it seems like a lot of the companies are struggling a bit, and people are saying it's not really going to happen for a while, maybe 2030, maybe into 2035s. What do you think of that? Do you think the UAM market is going to take such a long time to kind of come to fruition, or do you see it as being something that's a bit closer to hand?
I do think it's going to take a little bit of time because of 5 things that are still left to be implemented within the space. So one being FAA and government policy approval. So that policy piece of it that accompanies this technology is going to be key for it to actually operate in the space. You're still going to make sure you have a dedicated airspace to these vehicles in the air. So that's the other piece of it that hasn't, fully been worked out. They've been operating and testing in private, secluded airspace by airports right now. But, as they're going into production and actually executing different flight paths, it needs to be a dedicated airspace for these vehicles. And then lastly, a couple more things. So air traffic monitoring training. So the current air traffic monitor controllers that are monitoring the various aircraft that's in the space right now, they need to also be trained as far as how to communicate those, these aircraft that are going to be now in the space and how do you maneuver and make sure, accidents don't happen and things like that. That is going to be key for us to move forward. And then lastly, I know WISC is now having Houston as their base, but we're going to be the storage and land bases for these unmanned vehicles. So where they're going to park at the end of the day or at the end of the various missions to really look for the next mission or look for the next flight path that they're going to go on.
Real estate.
Yep.
Yeah. Which is kind of, if you look at electric vehicles as an example on the road, actually electric vehicle adoption has really taken off, if you pardon the pun. But we've got much stronger rates of adoption for EVs now than I think anyone would have dreamed 5-6 years ago, let alone 10 or 12 years ago. But the thing that's starting to really become an issue is real estate and infrastructure. So, there was lots of easy to get at charging locations, and actually putting the power in for 1 or 2 chargers was fine. But these big charging parks with like 10 chargers or 20 chargers or 30 chargers, actually it's really long, lengthy project to build that and put the infrastructure in and such like. So imagine a kind of airport in inverted commas for a UAM type aircraft, even if it's not autonomous, even electrified sort of light mobility aircraft. It's actually quite a significant project to put enough power in to have a serviceable place for a significant number of aircraft to operate from.
Exactly. The power grids need to be ready for that uptick in utilization for these vehicles to accommodate, how we're going to manage that supply for the various cities. Because I see it being rolled out into various cities first, like the major cities. But, like you said, real estate is going to be the key thing to accommodate, where you're going to store these vehicles, how you're going to charge them, how are they going to be incorporated into that normal life like we see that.
Yeah. I do think, though, there is a very strong driver, and it is I'm based in the UK, and really most cities in the UK are fairly small, so the relevance isn't as kind of in your face as it is when you start looking at larger cities in Asia or the US, where actually, you mentioned about not wanting to sit in traffic. It's certain parts of the world, like the sort of problems with congestion and public transport, and just that it is chronic. Moving people around is a massive challenge. That there's a very good opportunity to solve that, either moving people around or moving equipment and goods around with this sort of aircraft. So there's a gap in the market for it.
Yeah, I definitely see the gap in it. I see the need. The other piece of it that we have to make sure that people are aware of is the customer trust piece of it. So, people need to trust to utilize this technology for it to really come to fruition, because it's going to be a drastic change from what people are used to as far as if they're using like unmanned UAM, you're really going to trust somebody to, fly this remotely or autonomously, and you're okay with that going forward.
Yeah, I wouldn't get in an autonomous car, but I get in an autonomous aircraft. Maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
But then, aircraft as it is do fly significant portion autonomously, albeit it's quite different at high altitude, and the safety comes from the control of the airspace rather than systems on the aircraft itself. You certainly don't have random stray pedestrians to deal with, which is one of the problems on the road.
That is a benefit.
Do you think, because they can be quite noisy, they can be sort of, there's a bit of a discussion about, are they actually going to be that sort of cheap? Do you think, knowing what you know and seeing what you've seen inside the business, Do you see it being this sort of, again, this kind of almost science fiction image of these things being mass deployed? So sort of almost every transportation movement would be by an aircraft like this, or do you think it'll still be quite a niche use case of, like going to a trip from the airport or whatever, but quite a specialized use case? Or do you think it's a more general use case? Where do you see it going? Taking over the world or specialist?
I think it all depends on the customer use of it. I think if the customer and the public are demanding it more, I do see it maybe taking over, personal flight, helicopters, things like that. I really don't see it, massively being taken over because those things are really small. So it's going to be hard to navigate a lot of them in the airspace at once. But, I think that it will have a significant impact on the industry for sure. I mean, if you look at how Uber and those type of platforms, the taxi industry and the ground transportation, taxis are really, almost null in existence right now, but they're still having their lanes here and there. So I think it definitely will create a lane for it. How big that lane becomes, I think it depends on how much the customer, approve the safety, trust the vehicle, and how quickly the customers have that experience with it. So, it gains that momentum to really make it a big impact.
Because one of the things, the helicopter market, so just going back to more conventional aircraft. So when you look at normal helicopters, obviously fantastic machines, really quite complex in terms of making them fly and stay in the air, quite hard to fly. So a high cost in terms of the pilot and the training requirements that are needed to pilot aircraft. And it's not something that everyone can even do, to be honest. You need to have very high degree of motor skills, and it's a very, very difficult thing that requires a lot of training to fly a helicopter. And then helicopters themselves are tens of millions of dollars per aircraft. And at the minute, I think globally we make something like 2,500 a year. It's surprisingly a low volume industry.
Mm-hmm.
For a single helicopter platform, 300 or 400 units is a really high per year. Is a really high volume. But then I've seen some of these electrified urban air mobility aircraft providers. They're talking about tens of thousands. Actually, one of them, I saw a presentation where they're talking about building 100,000 aircraft a year, which is, they're going to be everywhere at that point.
Yeah, exactly. That's like pie in the sky. I mean, that they may be talking about globally, things like that. But tens of thousands for a specific region, I think that's going to be hard pressed coming out the gate because the technology is still being up ramped. I think it may get to that point for sure, but I just don't see that coming out when it's first introduced. It's like, yes, it'll be thousands available, but it'll be globally.
Yeah, it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how it develops, and obviously a big enabler of these new aircraft has been high density electric motors and better battery systems. I mean, it's still maybe not quite there yet on the battery system front, but being able to put lots of electric motors driving your propellers on the aircraft changes the way that it can be built and flown compared to a conventional helicopter, which has to. Yeah. There's a lot going on at the top of a helicopter to make that thing fly properly. So, it'd be interesting to see how that develops and how that carries through. I guess sort of final question on that, but is there a big crossover, do you think, between the civilian application and the kind of defense applications in terms of the technology? Do you see technologies being applied in civilian aircraft that are also being developed for defense type applications, or do you think it's actually really two quite different, distinct, parallel markets?
No, I think it has some core technology that are going to be similar. So I think autonomy and AI are going to be similar to some extent because it still needs to sense, avoid, detect, do those type of things in the different airspace. It'll just have to be programmed in different ways because, from a defense application, you're avoiding missiles, things like that, or the, fighter jets and at speeds that are, from an urban civilian standpoint, you're not reaching in that. So that's going to be the key difference maker between those two. But I do think it's going to be similar constructions, groundwork that are going to be very similar in those respects, because it's going to be a autonomous platform that needs to do, X, Y, and Z. It needs to fly, it needs to avoid, it needs to detect, and it also needs to be, the backup being, the manned or air traffic control or someone else on the back end, either to shut it down or make sure it's maneuvered the right way in those critical emergency settings.
Yeah, interesting. So I mentioned at the beginning that you have your own newsletter that you publish. Yeah. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, new technology has always been something that I've been interested in, and it's really technology that's matured, autonomous technology that's really grown as an interest for me. And so that, you think about like the Jetsons cartoon, where you see society going forward. That's kind of how I saw myself, moving toward the autonomous space. And really how I got introduced to publishing this newsletter is really through working with my executive career coach. So he saw the passion, the expertise, and the experience that I had in this space. And he really thought others should be the elements that were inquisitive and would know about this, know about this subject matter, would be interested in hearing my perspective on things, coming from the aerospace industry. So shout out to Jewel Love and the Black executive community for that nudge that I got to start publishing it. And then also, the continued support. So in the newsletter, I really focus on autonomous technologies for air, land, sea, and space applications. And I've written about, looking at autonomous business jets, autonomy and artificial intelligence that we mentioned earlier, and highlighted a few startups that I saw that are making waves in the industry. So that's how I got started within that, publishing and authoring that newsletter.
Oh, cool. And what sort of audience is it aimed at?
So it's aimed at, other professionals or autonomous enthusiasts, other industry enthusiasts as far as within the aerospace industry, and others that are just really curious about new technology. So that's really the audience I'm looking for.
Excellent. And then that is kind of expanded now into a bit of a media empire.
Yep.
So co-host of a new podcast, Brothers in Aerospace and Defense. Can you tell me some more about that?
Yeah, so that actually developed into something that a colleague of mine, Dwayne Allen, who works at Raytheon Technologies, we both saw a need to, and this is kind of getting back to where we're both passionate about progression of minorities within the STEM field. So we both saw a need within the area as far as people that look like us to share their perspective of new aerospace technology trends, really breaking down how you view different things in the aerospace industry, but also how, commercial jet industry, how that is really viewed at from an industry professional's perspective.
Yeah.
And, we delve into the latest topics in the industry. So we've talked about CCAs, we've talked about our own personal backgrounds of how we got to where we are. So it's really looking at inspire the next generation, but also having an insight into, your personal insights about, things that are happening within the industry.
Oh, fantastic. Obviously, I enjoy doing podcasts because we were here today. So it works quite nicely for me. Gets me interesting conversations with people like you. So it's worth doing. There's a great way of kind of disseminating information. Podcasts are such a great format in terms of they're quite straightforward to put together, good to publish, kind of available forever then. So podcasts I recorded years ago still getting listened to now for some reason. So there's a good back catalog.
Podcast, so I can't complain.
Yeah. So yeah, we have a back catalog now. So it's good. So it's great. Yeah, fantastic that you're doing that. I do wish you every success. It's a great way of getting your name out there and getting information out there. So brilliant. So in your industry, then, you're obviously you're an expert in what you do. You're working for Boeing, so famous company in the space, literally in space or in. I didn't quite pull that joke off the way I'd expected it to, but Boeing are famous in space and other stuff. So massive business. What is it like? Working for a big company like that. how have you found it in terms of getting into the business and then progressing through the business and sort of opportunities that are available to you? I know some people like find big companies very difficult. It's a lot of bureaucracy and kind of difficult to get through. What's a company like Boeing like for you?
No, I think it's been amazing. So my whole career has been in the aerospace and teams. You got two major companies. So I thought Navigate is, it's been similar for me given my background. I joined Boeing in 2018. So after 7 years of work within that, that technology. So, but I think, mentorship and having a great support system is always going to be beneficial for anyone in their career path, especially as you want to progress further forward. And that, that helps you navigate through tough situations that you have to either management or colleagues, but also, especially within as minorities in the field, research indicates that people of color, especially Blacks, experiencing high levels of discrimination, and occurs, at various like microaggressions, things like that, having that mentorship and having that support group is really going to be helpful for them going forward. So I think that being in this space is really helping me grow as a person, but not only as a person personally, but also a person professionally. So I think just having, those people that I have as far as my board of directors is really going to be beneficial for me as I move forward in my career path.
Yeah, fantastic. And do you see, some of the programs that you're involved with now, they're very, very long-term programs. What are you going to do with that? What do you hope to do in terms of your progression?
Yeah, I think, what I hope to do is lead one of the major autonomous development programs from like womb to tomb. So I think that seeing that progression from, startup initiation, start of an idea to actually, the delivering an aircraft to the customer, I think that's something I see myself leading in the future. And I look forward to that progression because I've worked, in various functions in supply chain, program management, quality, and like I said, supply chain. It's been really afforded me the opportunity to grow more in those various segments. So I'm really taking that knowledge that I have in those segments as I move forward in my career path.
And in the industry in general, what are you excited about that's either happening right now or that's coming in your sector?
Yeah, what I'm really excited about, looking forward to, are really two things. So one, what we talked about earlier, as far as policies that are being made that are really, enabling that true urban air mobility. That'll be something for, coming in the years to come. But also, completely outside of the aerospace industry is something that I see autonomous vehicles being utilized more in the healthcare space.
Yep.
So that's something within drones being delivering medicine, relief, and even organs to people in times of medical emergencies. I think that'll be great to see that come forward, and maybe even some minor surgeries being able to be completed autonomously. I think that's something that's not that far along or not that out of the scope or balance for coming in the near future.
Yeah. So it's interesting. You're excited about policy. That's
No, I want the technology to come forward because policy has to be approved and pushed through for the technology to.
Yeah, that's the limiting piece. And do you think it's close? There seems to be some noises going on, the right kind of noises coming. Is that?
Yeah, I think it's close. I think if we get the right leaders in place to make sure that it is truly for the technology, for the customer experience, I think we will cross that bridge fairly soon. I just think that, if people, get out their own agendas for these various things that really truly focus on the safety and applicability for the technologies, I think that's going to be.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because at a policy level, you've got kind of two, with the autonomous stuff in general, and so there's two sides to the coin in terms of what the big macro driver is. So on one side, you've got, right, we need to make the world more efficient and more productive. So actually, we've got labor shortages, like we talked about in engineering, but actually pretty much in everything. You've got labor shortages in truck drivers, in plane pilots, in helicopter, et cetera, et cetera. So any highly skilled profession, we've got labor shortages in, and we've got problem with air quality. We've got problem with climate change. So there's a few big kind of drivers on that side. We say, okay, if we can make stuff more efficient, if we can make stuff automated and kind of not require as many humans involved in the delivery of a particular service, whatever that might be, that's kind of all the positive drivers. But then on the other side, you've got people who are sort of saying, no, hang on. What about all the truck drivers? What about, the guys driving the motorbikes, delivering the transplant parts? They're all going to put all those guys out of a job. And there's sort of two really big, it's almost like tribes competing on the autonomy is good, no, autonomy is bad sort of front. What do you think of that? And when you see those kind of arguments?
Yeah, I think that, the technology is going to enable new job creation in itself because of how we talk about the real estate being necessary to enable, the storage of these vehicles and the actual maintenance. So that in itself is going to create, new job creation for the various cities and where they're going to be housed. So I think if you look at it from that perspective, it's just like a job transfer of, doing one thing from doing to the next. And then, this new job creation is going to require like new training. So it's easily be able to, transfer, training from one, doing one thing to doing something that's similar, but also within the same realm of scope for these individuals. So I think it could be, win-win in that if they look at it from that perspective.
Yeah. I do think, a lot of times people sort of talk about these industries. I mean, my father was a truck driver and it wasn't a great job, to be honest. Long hours and lots of time away from home. And, he actually died of a heart attack in the end. Unfortunately, not when he was driving. So that was good. But, it's pretty difficult. And things like big discussion about mining the other day and actually, being a miner is not a great job, in terms of very bad health, issues and bad working conditions and all that sort of thing. So, putting autonomous systems into environments that are, not optimal in terms of people working in, and if like long distance truck drivers, all their families, their family life and things like that would be very different if we didn't have that kind of thing. So it's going to be really interesting the next maybe 5 years in the run up, because it's not. But people saying autonomous aircraft in the 2030s. Well, it's five-ish years.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be that's gonna be a tough pull. But I'm curious to see. I think the policies is the major thing hold up, because I think the technology and the testing is being close to being ready, but the policies and things like that need to be all signed off on.
And you mentioned in the things you're excited about being the more like road vehicles as well, coming in the short term. Was there anything in particular on that front that you've seen that you think that's near to happening?
I think from a ground vehicle standpoint, I'm curious to see how autonomous technology has really improved public transportation. So as you think about like the bigger subways, either that being autonomous driven or other railways, high-speed railways that are being developed right now, how that affects the economy and the artificial intelligence that are being created to, create that whole urban city 2.0 vision that people are looking at.
Yeah. It is, public transport, for example, a bus. We have these big buses, which sometimes are full and sometimes are not full. But really, the reason a bus is the size it is, like very big, is because of trying to maximize the passenger capacity to the costs of operating it, and the driver is one of the bigger costs. So if you have an autonomous vehicle now, it potentially could look quite different. It doesn't have to be the same. Same thing with a truck. It's all about maximizing the payload to the operating costs of the truck, where the driver's one of the biggest costs. So I do wonder, I talked to someone a couple of years ago, very, very smart guy who at the time was working at Volvo Construction Equipment. And he had this wonderful saying, which I think he actually stolen from someone else. He told me later. But I love it. He talked about replacing elephants with ants. And it's a concept of, we have these elephants today, be it a truck, be it a bus, even an aircraft, right? So a big aircraft.
Yep.
So we have elephants. But when we change that operating cost model by having an autonomous system instead of a piloted system or a driven system, then can we have ants instead? And, if you look at how ants move around, obviously can be much more flexible, could work together, can create a more dynamic system. So kind of really interesting what might happen at a fundamental level with some of these aircraft or road vehicles, ground vehicles, as the operating nature of them changes with more autonomy in the system.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm curious to see kind of where things go too, because I think you can start with the ground and get people to trust the technology a little bit easier than, if you go in the air. But the air market is, vastly, it seems like progress further than the ground transportation. I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of the Teslas and things like that can be operated autonomously, if you let it, but you still have the backup being, you could control it yourself as you're driving.
Yeah. Well, I do wonder as well, if you have a car, so the way that we think about commuting, for example, today, commuting is an active process. If I want to drive from home to work, I have to drive.
Yep.
And I'm not allowed to do anything else. I'm certainly not meant to do anything else, even though sometimes, obviously not me or you, but some people, get distracted and do other things. But that's today, right? And so if you then change that from being an active process where, okay, I can do something else now, so I can use that time in a different way, then does it matter that it's, do I have to get from A to B very fast? Or if I can do something else whilst I'm doing that journey and it's not, that I just have to focus on doing the journey, does the time actually matter? And if I can go from my front door to that location and be driven autonomously by my car, if it takes 20 minutes longer than it would have done if I'd gone and got a train and, am I still going to go and get the train and have the sort of inconvenience of changing the modes of transport if I can use that time productively in the car? Like there's a...
Yeah, I mean, I think it all comes down to productivity and then how massively other people can, utilize technology. Because I think if you're seeing half the people are using hybrids or electronic vehicles, then the other half are utilizing kind of autonomous vehicles, then you have to just make sure the technology and the software is programmed enough to recognize, the various vehicles that are on the road, because you still have human drivers in the space, versus if they were all autonomous, then it all could be kind of just working in normal, free flow in that perspective.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And the biggest challenge, I think, I don't know about you, but obviously when I'm a passenger in a vehicle, I can't read for more than about 5 minutes without feeling sick.
Oh,
if you needed to do work, actually, like, are we going to be able to do work in a moving vehicle or do other stuff, and actually not be on... I think there's a few unknown issues there yet if everyone just gets really sick because trying to watch a movie or read a book or, write an essay or something, you're not going to do it, are you?
Yeah. I know my wife is the same way. She gets motion sickness as well, especially she's in the 8 month, going on 9 months of her pregnancy. So we're expecting a new little one next month.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. But yeah, I think, that's something that has to be worked out with the technology. I'm not sure if it's something that, they have wristbands or something available for people that get motion sickness, but it's something that, it has to be solved, because, you want to create that system. And I think their biggest selling point is the productivity that you get while not driving, but also doing something else while you're, being driven.
Yeah, I saw a concept the other day where they had like the headset, a bit like, the Apple Glass or the whatever different other headsets are available. And apparently it's like basically because your head kind of moves and your eyes are moving, but there's like a discoordination between the thing that you're concentrating on and the movement in your head, and you get kind of an imbalance. But with the goggles, you can keep it like perfectly in sync with your eyes. So apparently it reduces that sort of sickness feeling, so you can read stuff. But I was kind of, actually that's a kind of weird concept in itself. Getting into my autonomous car, putting on goggles, so I'm completely then unaware of what's going on around me.
Surroundings,
yeah. You might as well blindfold yourself. I'm gonna get blindfolded and thrown in the boot, then driven.
Yeah.
Oh, thrown in the trunk. Sorry.
Yeah. That, I mean, technology today is insane as far as how far we advanced from like the flip phones and things like that, the huge portable stuff that we used to take. So it's exciting to see, but also I think they're solving a lot of problems that we could even think about from that.
Yeah, amazing. And actually, on that, looking at the time, that's a good point for us to end today. We're slightly over time, so thank you very much, Rob, for taking the time to talk to me today. It's been really interesting. Best of luck with your future career, both at Boeing and with your newsletter and your podcasting. I hope that goes really well. You're obviously a natural, so thanks for coming along today.
Yeah, happy to be here, Ryan. I really appreciate the time today. I think it was a great discussion that we had. I think, people like us are really having those conversations to really inform people of how it is progressing and how it can be trusted moving forward. So, appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. And for everyone listening, there'll be links in the show notes below, as usual, so you'll be able to find Rob and also find his newsletter, podcast, and things like that down in the show notes. Thank you very much.